Running in from a train. So, as some of you will know, the West Coast line can be a little bit horrible when it comes to signal. But very pleased that you've joined us for this week's Pension Playpen Coffee Morning. We're delighted that Terry Pullinger's joined us for an in conversation, and Henry is going to act as host. Dependent on his signal, but there are some key areas we want to discuss with Terry. So we are recording. So Paul, JQ, Billy, everybody thumbs up. Terry, we're being recorded.
Okay.
We are being recorded, and the video of today will be on Pension Playpen this afternoon. So Henry, shall I pass to you first, and you can do some introductions, and then we'll see how stable your
Steve,
signal is. Yep.
No, if you would allow my other feed to get in, that's stable. You just won't allow me in on the other one.
I'll bring you on the other one if I can see you in the lobby, but you're not there yet, Henry, so that's fine. So, but you start, Henry, as you are. Okay, I'll start then. So there we go. Terry, for the benefit of our esteemed audience, probably best to sort of start with an introduction. You know, who are you? Where do you fit a bit like blind date? Who are you? Where do you come from? And all that sort of stuff. And yeah, so okay, Henry. Yeah, but Henry, go into the lobby, and I'll let you in. But you're not in the lobby at the moment. So, but Terry, over to you.
Oh, well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for the invite. It's a pleasure to come on and talk about this issue, especially as last week on Monday, the new Royal Mail scheme that we negotiated and designed with the help of a lot of people. Con, thanks, mate, he's on there, and Henry, of course, and a lot of other people. So basically, my name's Terry Pullinger. I was the Deputy General Secretary Postal for the Communication Workers Union, responsible for over 100,000 postal workers. Before I had that role, I was a local rep, divisional rep, etc. Worked my way up through the union, always elected to these positions. The DB scheme in Royal Mail closed in 2008. And from that moment on, every new entrant went into a DC scheme. I was elected to the Deputy General Secretary role and became responsible for term condition pension workers in 2016, I think it was 17, and was immediately hit with a proposal from the employer to totally close the DB scheme and move everyone into a DC scheme. For ease of reference, let's say it was 50-50, 50% of postal workers in the DB scheme, 50% of workers in the DC scheme. DB members didn't want their scheme to close, saw DC as inferior. So the dilemma we had was you got half your membership prepared to go on strike and fight for their DB scheme, protest, and then you've got half the members saying, well, why have you left us in this rubbish DC scheme then if it's no good? So we needed a solution that would unite everybody. Plus, I could not get in, in my head, I couldn't work out why suddenly DB wasn't the answer for people, a wage in retirement, wage for life. Over the course of the sort of last 25 years, DB schemes have been obliterated. Conventional wisdom suggesting you couldn't have DB schemes, and the only show in town was a DC scheme. So to me, there was a clear lack of options, and I wanted to know why it was once a good idea, why it isn't a good idea now, and why we can't replicate it or do it in a different way, if indeed you accepted DB couldn't happen. And for Royal Mail workers, the answer for us, we sat down with First Actuarial, and the answer for us was to design a new scheme, use the issue of CDC to generate the wage in retirement. We met with Henry and Con on the Con Keating on the Friends of CDC, as they were at the time, and also the Royal Society of Arts, David Pitt Watson, people that have been pushing the concept for a long time. And with First Actuarial's help, we designed a scheme which replicated the DB scheme in design. The lump sum that you get from your DB scheme, that lump sum in our new scheme, is still DB in nature. So every year when the valuation's done, that is promised to you backwards. So each year that is updated, and then that's a DB commitment. The wage and retirement element is being delivered through CDC. Our modelling suggested at the time, and still stands up, and people are now quoting that, other people in the pensions industry, and of course being reported in the Times last week as well. The outcomes, as far as we could see over the same period of time, actually suggest that it would have outperformed DB. But of course, you've got that risk of your pension going down at one point and adjustments being made. So it's flexible, it shared the risk. So it seemed like a great idea to us. But of course, the legislation weren't in place. So we had to lobby all sorts of people that helped us politically, etc. Could name them all, but it would go on. And eventually we got it through. But we made that agreement in 2018. We managed to get our members to back us on that leap of faith. And sadly, because of COVID and wars and all sorts of things, it's only just come in last Monday. But during that period of time, the evidence is, I think, compelling that we desperately need pensions schemes that are wage and retirement, wage for life schemes for decent working people. The state pension is being pushed out all the time, and it certainly isn't enough for people to have some sort of dignity in retirement and any chance of a reasonable standard of living. It's desperately needed. There's been a lost 25 years, I think, with that. The evidence, I think, is compelling that DC doesn't come up, doesn't produce the goods, isn't good enough. And I think I'm very proud, actually, to have been part of this and be on it today, because I think this will really change. I think we've made some historical changes here, and the innovation that can come from it is what's important. So no one's suggesting we came up with, the answer, but I think the answer's out there in many different forms, and hopefully now people will seriously get involved in it. So we've gone from concept to reality now with this scheme being introduced. And now it's a case of making that work. It's important to 100,000 postal workers that it works, but I think it's important to drive the innovation for people that are self-employed, people in small businesses, people that have only got DC pots and need some real genuine alternatives in the pensions industry to turn those pots into serious pensions. That's me. That's where I'm coming from.
Thank you, Terry. That's really good. I've put on the chat, if anybody wants to ask a question of Terry, then please do. I mean, this is sort of an amazing sort of point in time, because the biggest thing, whether you're DB or DC, the biggest thing in pensions in the last 10 years has probably been, pension freedoms. I would say this is potentially up there as the next biggest thing. We can talk about lifetime allowance and changes and annual allowance changes, but I think this is the biggest thing to happen in the pensions industry, Terry, for many, many years. And congratulations on behalf of everybody here for achieving what you've achieved. That's 200,000 people in a pension scheme, which a few years ago seemed a long way off. I suppose what I'd like to ask is, and we've got lots of questions that we want to ask you later on, but what I'd like to ask just generally is, when you were designing the scheme, what did the actual members want? What do you think were the sort of 3 or 4 drivers that members actually wanted to create what you've created?
Well, I think that's what did the members want? What did the members need? Is the issue. I think what became, the more we delved into it, because when I was suddenly responsible for it, I wanted to understand myself. And what I found was, amongst the members, not just the members, I'm talking about people high up on the managerial side, could be an HR director, could be anyone. The knowledge gap on pensions is massive. It's massive. And you try to have that conversation with people and and young people, and that's miles off, you know what I mean? I'll be right saying it, turn up, we'll sort that out. It's a fact. In pensions world, I think I found, it seemed to me that it was a pretty small world, really. And I don't, no one, please, don't take this personally. I'll just say it as I say it. I felt there was a lot of snobbery in the pensions world, in the pensions industry. They use a language that ordinary people don't understand and can switch off. Many people, I think, I've said before, I see it as a cure for insomniacs. But it's been there hasn't been nowhere near enough effort to educate people on what they're going to need in their old age. So I suppose in a way, my philosophy is a bit nanny state, and that's why I say what people need as well as what people want. But I'll tell you what people want. People who do a physical job, well, anybody should be entitled to a reasonable retirement and slow down. No one's saying people have got to stop. I mean, there's no retirement age now as such. But you need, if you do choose to retire, you absolutely take a whack on your income. There's no two ways about it. Of course you do. It drops right down. So you've got to prepare for that. And you need something in place. Now, where I say there hasn't been enough done, and I think that whatever drove the closure of DB schemes, DC schemes being the only answer, pensions, freedoms, whatever people want to talk about, from a society point of view, I think it's created a massive problem. I think there's going to be almost like a human stampede of pensioner poverty if things aren't done soon. Just because people were living longer, I don't know if they still are, given people's circumstances now, but just because people were living longer, that doesn't mean to say they can still physically do the jobs that they were doing. Otherwise, we'd have a 79-year-old fireman or whatever. You know, there's a reality to it. And it's the statistics, the research that I've seen that suggests that, 69% of people have made no provision for their old age. Very small percentage believe that they're going to be all right in their old age. And I think pensions is the answer to that. I think to me, it just makes so much sense that a decent wage for life pension that runs alongside your state pension takes a huge burden off the public purse in terms of benefits and everything else. It's a long-term issue, not a short-term one. And I think companies, the government, politicians, companies, everybody should pay far more attention to getting that message across to workers. And one of the things is for encouraging businesses to put these things in place and make sure their workers, their long-term outcome is being looked after. And I have to say, it's worrying me about employers paying more NI, not employees, but the debate has come out today, because if they got to pay more money, I'd rather they were putting them into decent pension schemes, rather than the DC schemes, which people have gone into because we've had auto enrolment. And you can say to someone, a younger person, are you in a pension scheme? Oh, yeah, I'm in a pension scheme. How much you're paying into it? What sort of scheme is it? And what you're finding out is it's not. It's a small savings schemes, and it's going to be totally inadequate. So, yes, we can tick a box and say there's auto enrolment. That's the start of it. But it really should be about getting people into decent pensions that realistically are going to protect them in old age. So the knowledge gap is huge. I think it has to be a little bit nanny state. I think we have to put the responsibility, everyone share the responsibility. Employers should be thinking about that with proper pension. I think ultimately it will benefit society if it's done properly. And also, I think you should get the message across in a different way. So very briefly, I'd say this, rather than say pension, the way I got people's attention was talking about a wage in retirement, a wage for life. And people go, what do you mean a wage for? Even when I've stopped working, it gets the attention far more than saying to people about a pension. So there's a way of presenting it, and I think we've got to find a way of presenting it to people that are not in the pensions world, that they can grasp it very quickly and come on board.
Okay, Terry, just to give you a bit of a rest, because that was an amazing sort of round tour of CDC and your experience. Con, do you want to just give us your background as to what you remember as the factors, and from the pensions industry side, what was important in terms of building the concept and getting Terry and the 200,000 to where they are today? What were the pension factors from the pension side that you had to worry about? And then I've got other questions for Terry as well. But Con, do you want to just comment on that?
Yeah, the concern really came about as a result of the use of gilt-based discount rates as the predominant way of valuing DB pension schemes. That single episode did more to inflate the apparent cost of DB pensions than any other action. Yes, there was in the early days some significant increase in life expectation, but that really hasn't been true for the last 6 or 7 years. We've actually seen life expectation and healthy life expectation, which is as important as life expectation, more so actually when people are thinking about working on into older age. So the declines that we saw in gilt yields, largely as a result of the chaos that was induced in the government bond markets by the mortgage-backed crisis of 2007-8, led to nonsensically low discount rates and apparent costs which were outrageous. Now, that drove the demise of DB more than anything else. One of the things that annoys me particularly about the few naysayers that remain is that they are pointing at the demise of DB in Holland. It's actually not true. There were a handful of CDC schemes created in Holland, and most of the Dutch schemes were actually thought to be DB until around 2004, 2005. They discovered that they didn't have an enforceable claim on employers. So the reaction then was not to materially change those schemes, but merely to rebrand them and call them CDC when they weren't at all. They were schemes where there was a guaranteed promise, and they took it away. So it's not really surprising that we saw a reaction from Dutch pensioners when they saw cuts being applied and being required to be applied by the Dutch pensions regulator, the Nederlandse Bank. That led to a need for a new form of pension, which was absent the recourse on the sponsor. And I mean, it's arguable, in fact, whether there was ever intended to be recourse at the level that it was applied at. The valuing a pension scheme at ever higher values, ever lower discount rates, makes no sense at all. I mean, one of the things which is probably interesting to compare this to is the Financial Services Compensation Scheme. Now, if an insurer were to default on its pension obligations, the Financial Services Compensation Scheme simply needs to raise a levy in each year which is sufficient to pay the pensions deficit in that year, and to do this repeatedly year after year. They do not need to claim on the balance of insurers in that marketplace the capital value at that point in time. They only need to claim capital values if they are transferring or selling those pension liabilities to another insurer. We made a classic error in the way we were valuing DB schemes, it's pretty clear that they were always perfectly viable. Some £300 billion of deficit repair contributions were required over the 20 years or so. And it's interesting that now the surpluses that we are seeing being thrown up are actually of a very similar order of magnitude to the deficit repair contributions which employers were obliged to pay in, and which now, with rates having returned to something more like normality, are being shown to have been unnecessary. It was a self-inflicted harm. Now, within DB, quite apart from the reliance on the sponsor, there's a lot of risk sharing going on among members. And it's that aspect of risk sharing among members which CDC, in its whole of life form, is able to fully exploit. And that's the predominant reason for the excess returns that are to be expected from CDC, not just relative to DC, but relative to DB. If you are taking more risk, it's perfectly reasonable to expect to be compensated at a higher level. And that in the modelling is exactly what we see.
Okay.
I think the CDC will prove not only superior to DC, but superior to DB in the fullness of time.
Wow. Okay. Terry, do your members understand the nuts and bolts of CDC? I mean, obviously you were talking earlier about knowledge gaps and that sort of stuff, but is there effectively risk sharing in your scheme? And what if it goes a little bit pear-shaped? What are the downsides to the structure?
Well, the downside is that your pension can go down even in retirement. So that's the downtime. Downside. I mean, the modelling suggested for us, we went right back, First World War or whatever. There was only twice in history that the scheme would have had to go down, and I think that was in the Great Depression. So all the modelling since, and I think that that's been robustly challenged and tested by a number of people now. And I just see the companies that are now sort of coming on board, Hyman Roberts and people like that are now also saying the same thing. The outcomes could be far greater. I think the other thing that CDC drives now, notwithstanding what Con said, because obviously absolutely look up to Con and his views on these issues. But I think in terms of the trade union and things like that, DB is still considered the gold standard because you've got that promise. But what CDC does drive, it means you've got to speak to the members of the scheme. You've got to speak to them each year. You've got to get them. And we did a number of briefings of our members and our reps to explain the scheme. I mean, people have got to want to take that information in. And as I say, not always people want to listen to talk about pensions, etc. But it does drive, I think, better communication. One of the challenges we were getting when we were proposing the scheme from the pensions industry was, what about communication? What about And I used to challenge back at these actuary meetings and things like that and say, well, what have you been doing about communication the last donkey's years, because people don't understand their pension, don't know what they've got. You've not spoke to them. They might get a letter once a year. They don't even know what that means. Most people just say, well, I don't know, when I retire. So people have challenged us in the pensions industry on issues where, they've not done anything. I mean, I've got to be honest, our first proposal was in terms of de-risk, was to have a flexible DB like we're doing with a lump sum. We wanted to do that with a wage in retirement as well. So we wanted to say You know, valuation's done each year, and then what you've built up is then promised to you going back, and then next year you see whether it goes up or it don't go up or whatever, you know. But it was, what you'd already got was DB in nature. But as Con says, and when people talk about the intergenerational stuff, you are sharing the risk even when you're retired, because how the scheme goes up or if the scheme goes down. So, you know, people may claim that they didn't know, but if your communication strategy has been of the highest standard, which it should be on any scheme, in my opinion anyway, but this drives the need for you to do that, then, you know, someone moaning that their scheme had gone down would only be doing it because naturally, like all of us, would have the ump about that if it went down. But over the course of the lifetime of that scheme, and the thing that really stands out to me is if it's managed properly, that means your scheme never has to close. So where people were making a case to close DB, and I agree with Con totally, I mean, he's the expert, not me, but it was what's sitting on the balance sheet and what you've got to have there for the next 25 years out and all that. I have to say, and this is right out there, and I know when you think I'm crazy, but there's an argument to suggest that was some sort of conspiracy to get employers out of DB scheme. I've got to be honest, because of the contributions they were making, it seemed, I think there was a lot of opportunism went on, especially once they lost tax relief on pension payment and things like that. I think it was also an opportunity for employers to do that, and using that sort of jargon to get out of it. And it's right, now we sit here now, we've got DB schemes that are, you know, in big surplus, and what do we do with that surplus, and people are going to try and encourage investment in the UK and all this sort of stuff. But a lot of them schemes could have survived. What's serious about that is since 2008, postal workers who are new to the business have been in a DC scheme. And now what happens with their pot? So, you know, part of the fight has to be now, you know, at the point of decumulation, what do people do with their pension schemes? How can we get those pots into pensions, you know, for life pensions? You know, that becomes, I mean, the crusade, I think, doesn't stop here. And that's why, you know, encouraging innovation, things like that. But the conversation is far more productive now. And I mean, when I first met Con and Henry way back then, I mean, honestly, there were times we were treated like absolute crazy people for even suggesting what we were suggesting. So it took some brave people. And to be fair, Jack Dromey and bless him, and the pensions minister at the time, Guy Opperman, I mean, to be fair, they saw the logic and came on board. We had a huge lot of opposition to beat down, and we've done that. So as I say, it's not just what we've done in our new scheme, because I'm absolutely convinced you can improve on everything, and that scheme over a period of time will get improved upon and all, I think. But it's needing these different options for different people in different situations. But I'll tell you what we know, right? As a serious truth, people are not saving enough for their old age. DC schemes are not cutting it. We need alternatives. We need things that are going to give people a proper retirement and the ability to retire with dignity and the chance of a decent standard of living in retirement. These are facts. So if you know these things, then the industry has to respond. And my point to the industry was this: I know the intelligence is in the industry. I know there is, but there's been, people have drifted into this DC world, non-DB world, and it's got stagnant. The industry needed a, kick up the backside, and I think we've now provided it. And the best people in the pensions industry, the people who, the experts, etc. Surely there's a vast opportunity here to have a number of options that seek to achieve the same thing, and that's the thing that's really needed. So,
yeah. Well, the crazy people got it done, Terry. So well done, you.
Yeah.
We've got a hand raised by Chris. Chris, do you want to unmute Chris and ask a question or make your point?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Harry. And been a massive fan of what's been going on over the last 6 years. It's been really impressive, and I would echo. I only had brief talks with Jeremy, rest his soul, and Guy Opperman, and the fact that they were talking about we working together to make it happen was absolutely fantastic. The main thing for me on collective defined contribution, the comparison with DB is it really highlights how much the guarantee in a DB scheme costs, and effectively all you're doing is taking away the guarantee and saying we're going to try and give you that, and it might be higher or lower, and when members sort of perhaps can see that and sort of say, oh, well, we're getting a 50% higher benefit, whatever it is, and what we're losing is the guarantee, and it may be higher or lower. It's a really attractive option. My main question for you is when I've been discussing with people, there's, like you said, that sort of naysayers. There's been a lot of people thinking that the existing way is the only way, and I know that's fallen away to a certain extent. But to push CDC forward to get more schemes out there, are there any sort of particular groups that would have to embrace it further, or have to get sort of further on board, do you think, or is that proliferation sort of happening naturally now?
Personally, I believe it'll happen. Same as I think there'll be other innovations now, because the facts are out there, aren't they? So these people that are still naysayers, who is it? That geezer John Rolfe, who's always piling in, isn't he? Who obviously, whether he just uses a platform, he likes to be the naysayer because he'll get invited on to, I don't know, speak on television or speak in the press or whatever. But I say to them people, listen, yeah, you may know a lot more than I do. I don't claim to be an expert on these things, but what I would say is, what is the state of play? What is the current situation? What are people looking at now? What is the state of occupational pensions, and what are they realistically going to do for people when they reach their retirement age? And please God, they have, enjoy a decent retirement. And it's the last 20, 25 years has been extremely damaging to that concept of a nice, dignity and a decent standard of living in retirement. And we're doing something about it. So I say to them people, what have you been doing for 25 years or 30? What have you been doing to ensure that? What contribution are you making to society when you know there's a problem coming down the road? Don't forget, we live in a time now where a lot of people are into their 40s and they're not even on the property ladder. We got lots of people coming up to retirement that are still renting. And have you seen the rents? And when I'm talking at events in the pensions industry, I say to people, all right then, from Monday, you're on 11 grand a year. State pension, circa. Imagine it. Imagine all us. I imagine it. You're down to 11 grand a year. That's what you've got to live on. And if you're renting a property, it's a no-brainer that there's got to be things in society that try to deal with that problem, not just deal with today, but deal with that problem way out there. And this can make a massive contribution. The issue of CDC, I agree with you, Chris, that taking the shackles off, if you like, in the way trustees or investors in DB have got, where they totally got in the position of just de-risking everything. Taking the shackles off in CDC, as Con alluded to, gives you that chance to genuinely invest, to try and make more money, better returns, to give people a better pension. And it's taking them shackles off, which those of us who are believers, enables us to genuinely believe that it could, as time goes on, it could outperform DB. Now, that's fantastic, isn't it? But until people see that, they're not going to believe that, and they're going to want their promise. And there can still be promises, can't there? There can be other innovations, and people can make a choice. But it is not an option now just to say to people, yeah, you get to retirement age. I know you've got to retire. You've got to step down a bit because whatever job you do, you're not physically capable of still doing it. And by the way, here's a lump of money. And what people do with that lump of money, or know what to do with that lump, they're as naive, without being rude to people. The vast majority of people are as naive to do what that pot of money as they are about what a pension actually is. And so communication as well as design going forward is hugely important, and finding a way to get that message across which people can relate to.
Yeah, great answer, Terry. Fantastic. Bryn, you got your hand up. Do you want to make a point or ask a question, or?
Well, it's sort of making a point, really, as ever. I'm not a believer in the strong man or strong person form of history, but clearly the personnel involved here were pretty crucial to getting this through. But they've done it, and so they've laid the pathway for other people to follow. But I think another essential element here, it seems to me, is strong collective bargaining structures. And I find it difficult to believe there's going to be much movement here where there aren't good and strong relationships between the employer and the trade unions. This is a collective agreement. It's a collective decision, and the collectivism involves trade unions. And there could well be other cases where it wasn't an essential element, but I think there'll be sort of one-offs. This is only going to be big time where the trade unions pursue it, because my villain of the piece is always the finance director, and why would they go there unless there's some pressure from well, essentially from the trade unions or the human resources department as to why this should be pursued as a good thing. And I just wondered whether Terry thinks I'm being too bleak about that.
No, I think you're being realistic about it. You've got to remember that this scheme was born out of adversity. We had a massive yes vote for industrial action, and there was a number of other issues we were dealing with. This was a biggie, and it needed a specific solution, which we managed to, by hook or by crook, to come up with. So you're absolutely right. But I mean, trade union density is I'm not sure if that's still falling. What I do know is the majority of DB schemes, if they're still open to new entrants, or if they're still open, would be in the public sector. I think in the private sector, it's probably pretty much getting down to zero. So this is why I think the industry itself and pressure points on politicians, on employers, using everything we can lobby to get the message across. So one, we're trying to, hopefully this will innovate for people, the many people that have gone into DC arrangements. Hopefully it will innovate to give people better options when they do take their DC pension, if not before, in terms of turning their pot into an actual pension. Hopefully it will become a major issue with trade unions. And it shouldn't be. This is always something I've always thought about industrial relations and trade unions. It shouldn't be that these things are only born out of adversity. I mean, it should be, if you can get the right conversations going and there's a bit of respect there. And quite often, these financial directors, etc., in companies and stuff like that, will, if the narrative changes, my experience is, if the narrative change, i.e., there's a new fashion next week, they take on the new fashion. They're just basically doing what they're told. So I think it's getting into company boards, it's getting the philosophy across, it's building the narrative. I mean, it's a long job, don't get me wrong, and people are always going to have an eye on the pound note, especially, companies, trade union job is often to try and get some of their money off them for the members. But there is, if you want good industrial relations, if you want good recruitment opportunities, retention opportunities for companies, there's lots of arguments here why this is a good thing for companies to do. And I don't think it's changed that much. And I always say this analogy. I imagine someone's son or daughter coming home, all sitting around a tea table. I managed to get a job today. Oh, did you? Yeah. Well, what do you get working for them? Well, this is my wage, and I get pension, and I get holiday pay, and I get sick pay, and all that sort of stuff. And I genuinely believe most parents, if they got any nous, would say, well, you look after that job because that's a good job. So the concept of what makes a good job, a decent employer. The concept of, in a world where jobs change a lot, companies change, how you transfer what you've already built up, how it becomes a conversation with people in their normal life. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's what I earn, but I've got this here and I can transfer that. So as I go through life, I can. There's no reason why that has to stop. It's innovation, communication, but it's changing that narrative. And if that got strong enough, that either it becomes an election issue or it can be the difference between people talk about the investment strategy, and this always gets me, you know, or what do they call it? The words quickly escape me. You know, where you're making decent investment in for the environment, companies that care about the environment, companies. It will come back to me as soon as we
ESG.
That's it. Good man. That's why I need the experts around me. I know what I'm thinking, but I need it. But that's, you know, that sort of stuff. Trustees, investment managers, it should be like that. That is a plus, not just what a company does with the environment, but how it treats its employees, how it's thinking about their employees' future, thinking about their potential retirement, whether they do want to retain staff. So even if someone's offering a few more quid in wages, they're not offering these other benefits, because that's what people at the top of businesses do. They look at the package, don't they? They don't just get wage. They look at the package and all the benefits they may get, which might be health or whatever. Well, you know, ordinary working people should be looking like that as well. What is the package? Not just the wage. And then you have to drive that home to say to people, you know, don't give this up lightly. Let's make it an issue for investment strategies. You know, where you're considering all these different things, consider that as well. And it can be presented as such a plus if people want to grab hold of it. And of course, if you've got a strong trade union, let's hope they don't trade it for wages either. You know, let's hope everyone, unions, everybody, is looking at this as a serious issue, which is going to seriously damage society if we don't get the grips with it. And the concept of everyone saying, let's leave it to the next generation better than what we have, that's not how it is with pensions at the moment. And we've got to get to grips with that and at least try, and we are trying. And I think we're on the right road. The conversation's moved in the right direction.
Yeah, done really well, Terry. Podreg, you got your hand raised, and then we'll come to Paul. Podreg, you want to unmute? Not sure Podreg can unmute. Paul, should we come to you next, and then we'll come back to Podreg if you can unmute?
Yeah, just had a quick question for Terry. Are you kind of concerned about employers buying into CDC on favourable terms, in terms of looking at the, you know, the design of the benefit, and then, you know, get further down the line, things become more expensive, then the easy option is just to kind of reduce the benefit. So my thought around that, kind of, if you have a defined benefit scheme, it's a promise, the cost goes up, contributions have to go up. It seems really important that you get the design right in the first place.
Yeah, I think I totally get that, and I think that would have been with the DB schemes, the fact that their contribution would fluctuate was also, and you know, in bad times fluctuates up, but the employees contribution, you know, they're always reluctant. If you're a trade union, you'd be reluctant to increase the employee one, although you might do if it saved the scheme, etc. I think one of the real benefits that we saw and the company saw in the scheme that we designed is their contribution is static, so they can account for that going forward. It's not going to go up. The way you deal with that, of course, is the way it's flexible in terms of what it pays out each year. So, for instance, if it's not that great, and you know, in my language, I know this is really crude, but you know, inflation RPI might be 3%, but as it happens this year, because of the performance of the investments, we can only put out 1%, but it's still going up. You know what I mean? So, but what they're not having to do is increase their contribution. They can take it to the bank. That's what their costs are.
I was thinking about that setting of the contribution level in the first place, in terms of, you know, is there a risk that somebody, you know, buys into this where the contribution rate they're going to have to pay looks quite favourable because market conditions or what have you, or views about future projections, and in reality you've undersold yourself and you've bought into a benefit that, you know, the reality has probably needed to cost a bit more. I guess it's about getting the design right in the first.
I mean, obviously, the stronger the contribution, the better. But I don't see why the model doesn't work. I've not seen it doesn't work if, say, for instance, the contribution was slightly less. I think even with DC schemes, you've got this is one of my questions. If you just leave it to an individual, if you start a job and they say you've got a contribution rate of 6% of your wages and the employer's matching it or paying a bit more, then you start work, and after your first pay packet, that's what you expect. If you come along to someone, and this is where I don't like it, where companies, and Royal Mail have done this as well, where they say you don't go into the pension scheme for a year. So after that year, you're suddenly going to someone and say, by the way, give us 6% of your money, and then that feels damaging. If every pound's a prisoner, that feels damaging for people. So, but the contribution rates going into DC, this is my point about auto enrolment, they're questionable. So I don't know, Paul, where the bar is in terms of what would give you a decent outcome, whether you believe in DC, the best outcome, or in this. But I think whatever you're paying in, it still seems to me that if you've got a collective arrangement, people are going to have better outcomes than they would as an individual. And if that can generate a wage in retirement, it doesn't matter really how small. We all know going forward that, week to week, for someone who's retired, hopefully run alongside their state pension, if it's not pushed out to a ridiculous age, then, it gives you half a chance. It's handy. It was really worth doing. So, I think the model can still work. I don't know how low it would be to be nonsense, but certainly you can have a variation, I think, of contributions, and the concept can still work in favour of the individual, the collective.
Cheers.
Cheers, Paul. Thanks for your question. Podreg, you're able to unmute now. Do you want to ask your question? Let's hope.
Yes, can you hear me? I'm sorry, it's very loud line.
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
Terry, I say this now as a trade union, but you mentioned about what's the industry done for the last 25 years. The union movement has to take its share of responsibility for this as well. I raised this with people like Brendan Barber many years ago, because there was a massive focus only on wages and not the long-term investment in people's futures, which you would have thought the unions would have got right behind. And it's a complete blind spot for many years, until probably after auto enrolment started getting introduced. So I'm no apologist for the industry. I think most people would probably accept that. But the unions need to take their share of responsibility as well, because they took their eye off the ball. People started getting retired from nothing, because none of the unions were fighting for much better pensions over the last 30 years.
Yeah, well, I can't disagree with you. What I would say, I think, perhaps in ignorance, the concept of DC at the time was being sold that it would still solve the problem. It would still give people the outcomes, and they could buy an annuity, and they'd still have a wage in retirement, etc., and it would be good enough. Time has proven that's not the case, and I like I say, I think everybody sat back on that. So also, I think there was probably a tendency to, if you could protect the people in the current DB, then new entrants, which quite often happens, then you accept a deal maybe, or a union does, where people have got inferior terms and conditions who come in the industry later on. So, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on unions when you're in that situation, and there's a potential deal for the existing people, but new people will have less in some way. Well, obviously, that's a deal that can be sold to existing people. And sometimes maybe sometimes things like that have happened. But I mean, I agree with you. I think everyone have taken their eye off the prize. And listen, it wasn't until I had the dilemma I had and we needed a solution that I myself looked into it in that detail. But I just could not, for the life of me, and I don't think this is the question that the pensions industry has really spent a lot of time on, other than, a minority at the time when we came up with our idea, was how is it that this great concept of a DB scheme, which everyone who's benefited from it are delighted, and it has enabled them to have a nice retirement, hopefully. How is it that that suddenly became a bad idea? Notwithstanding, you know, all the intricacies and the stuff that Con was talking about, that you guys absolutely know about. But why was it a bad idea? We all know it's a great idea. We all know that people need it. we lost our way, everybody. And yes, we can say, if we want trade unions, employers, politicians, everyone lost their way. And I think we went a bit, everything went, especially in terms of employers, all about money, it's all about profit, it's all about this, isn't it? And no one really cares about what happens to a generation when they get to the point where they potentially can't do the job they do, or can't work anymore, or can only go part-time. Or this is why you're ending up, you know, like in America, where I remember the first time I went to America, and I went in one of the big stores, whatever it is, Walmart or something, and I see some fella going up a ladder to put cereals or something up on a shelf. I couldn't believe it, the age of the fella, and I'm there like trying to hold his ladder, thinking, what's going on here? But if you want a world where people literally are having to work till they drop, and that's our vision of a civilized society, then, you know, stay as you are. But I think we took a really bad turn in terms of pensions, for whatever the reasons were at that time. And now's the time to put it right. And I think we've started, you know, we've made the big first step, and that's what's important.
Terry, great answer. And actually, Barry Mack put in the chat about, is CDC, if it gives people a decent retirement, a decent retirement wage, does that mean people can retire when they expect to retire, and maybe even early? And does that create more jobs and promotions, a better solution for an employer? That's a good point that Barry's made. Do you agree with that, Terry? And then we'll come on to Billy.
Well, I do. It was always the case, wasn't it? Because, you know, that people retired. I mean, when I first went into Royal Mail, it was like you retired at 60. People had the chance to retire at 55, but you retired at 60 in the post office, as it was at that time. And if people wanted to, they could have retention in special circumstances. If they were fit enough, they had retention till 65, and that was your up in part end at 65. So, but now, I mean, I know there's people that are retired, still want a purpose in their life, and they still want to do stuff, and good luck to them. And if they can, if they're fit enough to do it, that's great. But also, yeah, I think for the people who, if you put a lifetime of work in, you deserve a decent retirement, do whatever you want to do and whatever your hobby is. And that, don't forget, there's a lot of retired people do voluntary work, so they still contribute to the society and things like that, as many people do that. But also, if you leave a job and the job still exists, then that job's got to be filled. So it creates employment opportunities, and hopefully that person comes in and they come in on the same terms and conditions, and they will have a decent pension. You know, it's a you know, an ethical circle, isn't it? And it's people having that. I think that circle got broken as somewhere along the line, and you know, this is it should be, you know, let's not concentrate on the negatives and the people who want to put it down. And you know, it may not be the greatest thing that we've done here in terms of the design. It may prove to be brilliant as a design, but it's the first step. And from it now, we should stop talking about the things that have clearly on the research shown that they have not delivered for people. So let's push that aside. Yeah, keep shouting, shout from the distance, mate. Go on, out there, because it hasn't worked. The facts are people are not saving enough for retirement. The facts are companies have been getting away, I think, have been irresponsible about their employees' future after they've given them a lifetime of work, etc. The narrative has to be far more positive, far stronger, and we need to get back into the world where a proper wage in retirement, wage for life pension is part of your terms and conditions, and they should be highly valued. And we should be driving that through our industry, through politics, for everything else. And you know, the fact that we're having this chat today, I know I'm banging on because I can't help it. I'm full of it. You know, we
love it, Terry. We love it.
It seems so obvious to me. That's the trouble, guys. It seems so obvious to me that this is a no-brainer. If I'm a government, you know, and they're talking about benefits and they can't pay all the benefits and all that. Where people haven't got a pension and you're paying a pension out later in someone's life and they're forced to retire at 62 or something like that, you're going to be paying them benefits. You know, it's a no-brainer. This is, and who wants to live on benefits? You know what I mean? Anyone who has to. People talk about that, you know, as if, you know, people are taking money for, you know, I don't know, false pretenses. Really? Would you like to live on benefits? Can you imagine what it's like to, you know, it ain't what people try to make out to be. People want to stand on their own 2 feet. Dignity.
Yeah.
Proud people, worked all their lives, dignity in retirement, and a chance of a decent standard of living in that retirement. That's got to be our goal. And that's what's driven this. And it will continue to drive the debate. And it will continue to drive innovation, give people that security, turn pots into pensions, and I promise you it'll be a better place.
Yep. Great words, Terry. Great words. Billy, do you want to come next? Then we'll go to Bob.
Oh, hello. I'll be very quick. Terry, I love your style, and I love the way you started off by saying there's a lot of snobbery in pensions. I come from a working class background, and when I first came into this, I had sort of imposter syndrome, but I love the plain speaking. I confess to not knowing an awful lot about CDC, but my experience was with annuities, and especially with profit annuities. And sort of 25 years ago, I thought with profit annuities would actually displace conventional annuities, and there's a lot of parallels, and I was an expert witness in the Equitable Life mis-selling of with profit annuities, and I think that the bit that I'm really interested in is the communications, and also, and the problem with the Equitable Life with profit annuity is that people understood that the income could go up or go down, and people thought it would be smoothed, but actually there was what we call the precipice risk, which is the bonuses fell like a stone and people saw significant decreases in their pension. So first of all, I hope in the design of CDC that that the falls will be limited, and secondly, I think it's really important that that communications are such that people truly understand both the benefits and the downside.
I think they have to, Billy. I think people have to understand, and that's why I'm saying I think it will drive people who get into this. It will drive the best behaviours in terms of membership communication, members of the scheme. So because they need to know, they've got to know what's happening each year, and you know you have to keep drumming that message home. But I'm sure after a period of time of doing that, people will totally understand the design, and they understand it can go up or down. And what'll happen each year is that will become a day. You know, in a way, that'll be a day they anticipate or look forward to because they want to know how much it's gone up or if it's gone down.
I mean, in my language, you know, people can have their cake and eat it. You know, both some sort of guarantee plus, you know, a good boost if investment returns are good. Anyway, thanks very much.
Yeah, but you know, Billy, the other thing, although that's done annually, you would have that conversation. Well, you should be talking during the year as well. But although that's done annually, you've also got to get a message across the lifetime of the scheme. So that's where the modelling suggests to you, yeah, well, just stick with it. It's all right. You only got 1%, or it stayed static this year. But over the course of 25 years or whatever, this is what it pays you out. You know, that's important.
Yeah, I mean that's the problem. I mean the modelling is great, and of course Equitable Life would have said they had their modelling, but you know something came out of left field, and it was a disaster for the annuitants. And I just hope the same is not going to happen, with CDC members.
No chance. It's going to win, mate.
Yeah.
Thanks, Billy. Bob, your question. We're getting towards the end now, but yeah. Bob. Do you want
Okay,
to
I'll be quick. It's not really a question, but it's a comment. First of all, Terry, well done. Congratulations on what you've achieved, what Royal Mail have done, because it's really, really needed. It's brilliant what's been achieved, and I know it's taken a long time. But just to give some background to the full circle, back in the 80s and early 90s, I was creating and setting up brand new defined benefit pension schemes. Then about 1993, work was being done on the Pensions Act, the 1995 Pensions Act, which followed the Maxwell scandal and was talking about the good report looking at trying to improve the way defined benefit schemes were run, because originally the original trusts were set up. The requirement on the sponsor was basically the money paid into the trust. If the sponsor failed, the trust had to pay out the benefits, because the 1995 Pensions Act basically turned defined benefit schemes into guaranteed pensions. At that point, in fact, 2 years before, it's 93, I said to my company, I can no longer talk to an organisation and actually create a brand new defined benefit scheme, because I cannot hand on heart say to an employer, new company, this is right for your organisation. So the rot for defined benefit schemes started in 1995 with the passing of that Pensions Act. So the 2008 banking crisis just pushed that forward, and then we've had the regulator over the last 15 years pushing gilt yields as being the safe way forward. That really has killed it off, killed the golden goose. So what we've gone now is full circle. So effectively, CDC, you've taken out the guarantee from a defined benefit scheme, you're back to the original, early, very first trusts that were set up to provide defined benefits. So congratulations, well done. The big problem now is what happens over the next 5 to 10 years, and will organisations pick it up and carry on and actually use it? And I hope they will. So I've got a question. Will people who are at the Royal Mail who've got the defined contribution scheme, will they be allowed to transfer their DC pots into the new CDC scheme at a future date?
Right. So in the scheme, the answer to that is hopefully yes. But I mean, I'm not there now. I've left now, but I hope that's part of the innovation that will continue with that scheme. So either the members that have got their DC pots either can, at the point of decumulation, put it into that scheme, or they can do it now while they're still working. Ideal, so they buy their years now and get in, so that would be ideal. But that's conversations the union, CW and Royal Mail have got to have. But that was certainly on the agenda when I was still talking to them, that we need to have that. I mean, what we've got as well is the lump sum element, which I said to you is DB in nature, i.e. every guarantee. Also in that scheme, we've got the employee can volunteer to pay an extra 1% into that, and the company will match that as well. So, there's we've tried to use DB. I mean, Bob, you was designing DB schemes back in the 90s. It's that sort of it's that sort of knowledge that you've got is to spend it now thinking about, right, so generating a wage in retirement, whether it's DB or not, how do you do that? CDC is now on the table. It's there, right? So we'll see how history pans out. But it's the innovation bit, Bob, now. So, I mean, someone like yourself then, with that design knowledge, start thinking about self-employed people, start thinking about small companies. How can you come together in a bigger collective scheme? Start, that innovation. We need more stuff coming out.
Well, there's people like Henry Tapper who are doing stuff with Age Wage and Pension Superhaven, allowing DC master trusts to actually provide pensions for people when they need to retire. And that is the way forward, potentially. But CDC for organised groups of people is the way forward. I know the legislation hopefully will be being changed recently to enable collective CDC schemes, master trusts, to be provided. But at the moment, there's no commercial imperative for a master trust to go down the CDC route. And we've got to get the DWP, the government, to agree that actually you can have commercial providers generating profit from running these schemes. And at the moment, that's not really happening. But that's the next step.
I think, Bob, as well as the Royal Mail one, and people are going to have an eye on that, but there is already people talking about this. I think it's the Church of England, people like that are all saying about switching to CDC. So the more that happens and more people start to believe, the variations of the theme can flow for it. So like Pension Superhaven, etc., which I think we're going to talk about if you're going to have time, but that's a guarantee to people. That's what's trying to be done there, is a guarantee to people, with a 3% increase year on year, and a share of the profits Christmas time, if the profits provide that. So, but it's what interests me with all that. So someone has got a choice. You've got someone who might say, well, I'd rather go into that, and all right, I can take it at a bank 3% a year or whatever. You've got people that are saying, well, my CDC, I prefer the flexibility of it, because certainly in good times, I've had major boost, because in the CD scheme, you put it all back in, so it can go up hugely, it can drop a bit, it can stay static, and all that. If people know that, but over the course of a period of time they know they're going to come out better, then that people can make their choice, can't they? But there's got to be choices better than what we've had.
Absolutely. I'll keep quiet there. Thank you.
Okay, we've sort of run out of time now, Terry. It's been an absolutely fantastic session. Really enjoyed it, and congratulations to you and the team, and wish you every success with it. And I'm sure we get lots of virtual claps and lots of good comments in the chat. Yeah, Con's clapping. There you go. So that's big clap for you, Terry, from Con.
Can I just take a liberty and say to Con, how brilliant, when I first met Con and Henry at the Friends of CDC, they were so delighted that the potential of a big employer taking on the idea, but those guys were driving it before us, and as we all owe a massive thank you to them people, and to Con especially. Cheers, mate.
Yeah, well done, Con. Yeah, he likes red wine, Terry, by the way, so there you go. That's a little hint for you for Christmas, but there we go. Just be careful of the gift rule and all that sort of stuff. But listen, thank you everybody for joining today. Thanks especially to Terry for a very down-to-earth, rounded discussion regarding CDC. We wish the Royal Mail and your team, Terry, that I'm sure you're still in contact with a few people there, every success with it. Let's see if other employers will take it on board and create better outcomes for members and employees. It's definitely a very big development and innovation in the UK pensions market, and let's hope it's successful and produces the results. So but Terry, thank you for your time. Really appreciate that. A really great session, and I think we'll get you on again, Terry. You're a very entertaining speaker, so you tell it how it is, which is what we like.
Like a therapy session for me, so I'm more than happy to.
Oh, good, excellent. Yeah, we could all do some more therapy. That'd be great. So back to next week. Next week we've got LCP talking about the state of the trustee market and what's going on with independent trustees and sole trustees. So please join us next week. Thanks again to Terry. The video of today will be up and running very shortly, plus a podcast. So if you want to go to the gym, Con loves doing this in the gym with his podcast, then he can listen back on that. And we pray for peace in the East, peace in the Middle East. And Terry, thank you very much for a very informative and enjoyable session. So enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week. It's absolutely fantastic. So
thanks, everyone.
Cheers, everyone. And we'll speak soon. Hope you can join us on the next event. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.